Hey, this is Joel Widmer, and I am really excited. Today I have Ryan Williams. He is the author of the new book, The Influencer Economy, and also the host of the Influencer Economy podcast. How are you doing, Ryan?
I am great. Really pumped to be here.
Yes, I'm really glad to have you. This has been a topic that I'm really passionate about, and you and I met several years ago when you were actually, I think you were just starting, right?
Yeah, I was a newbie to the podcast world. This is, to put it in context, was before Serial, the epic podcast, came out. That's how long ago it was.
Wow. How long ago was that? How many years
I think
ago?
I started podcasting 2.5 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was early on in my podcasting days.
So Ryan has done it all. He has had 12 years in marketing, business development, and entertainment. He's been at startups that got acquired you were in a marketing startup that got acquired by Disney, right?
Yes, Disney acquired us for $18 million.
Man. And then did marketing for like Disney Parks and Pixar, social media and stuff, Activision, Warner Brothers. You've been a stand-up comedian, which I have much respect for, and I think everybody does after watching Louie.
Yeah.
You also worked at Machinima. Is that how you say it?
It's Machinima or Machinima, either works.
Okay. I've always seen it. I've never known how to say it. Which is one of the largest millennial YouTube communities in the world, founded in 2011. You've worked with London-based Opinion Network State, serving as a marketing director, and then you founded the Influencer Economy Company in 2014. Without going into too much more, you've done so many different things, and it's been really, really fascinating to just learn more about you and read the book. The book was unbelievable, but let's just get in, and I wanted to bring you here today just to talk about some of the concepts that I learned and that some of the things that I thought I knew, but you dug so much more into them. How's that sound?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it.
So first off, just tell me a little bit about the book is written really, really interesting in a really, really interesting way that I actually never see. I've read a lot of books. I have not seen a lot set up in this format. And what I mean is you have the stories, you have the different chapters, but the whole thing is laid out like a blueprint or like a plan with like you have the background, you have the story, you show why, and then you show the the action, the principles and action steps, right?
Actions and lessons, yeah. I love that format because when I started this project, I was really fascinated by influencers, and when I worked at Machinima, we had a very strong, loyal community of gamers, and Machinima is a gaming network, and so we have a YouTube channel with billions and billions of views, and I watched these kids play Minecraft, and they would make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And one of the guys we hired was an Olive Garden waiter. He was a server at Olive Garden, and he was making Call of Duty gameplay videos where he would narrate over the gameplay, and he was pulling in like $250,000 a year. And I was like, wow, there's this revolution going on. And I realized that YouTubers in general were like building these mini kingdoms of massive subscribers and massive money in the end. And so I was really curious about the context of how they were making the money. And I had this influencer economy idea. I branded the term. I Googled it. There was nothing else out there. So I bought the domain as fast as possible. I wrote a blog post, and I just sort of parked it there for a couple years. And then after I left state.com, I had done some deals to sell stock at startups, and I created a runway to pursue the influencer economy. And I started reaching out to influencers I knew in the gaming community, then the YouTube community, and then ultimately the podcasting world. And I was like, wow, this influencer economy movement, it's a way to launch an idea. And it's a way to build community and collab with other influencers and ultimately thrive with your business. And the book itself started out as chronicling these people. And I'm a really firm believer you have to collaborate with your community. And so I built an email list and subscriber base with my podcast. So I gave out the book for free. And I got this idea from Nir Eyal, who wrote a book called Hooked, and I had him on my podcast. And my wife said to me, that's a dumb idea. Never give out your book for free. Like, you want to make money from it. And I said, no, I need to give out chapters in advance because I want feedback and I need to make it better. And so I had these 10 business principles in the book. And I talked about them in each chapter, but I realized they weren't specific enough and they weren't actionable. So the people that I gave the book to, like friends and email list subscribers, told me I needed to be more forthcoming. And I said, all right, well, I need to make the actions and lessons. So I called it Influencer Economy School. And so I said each chapter is going to be reframed to be a step, because it was a progression. And I realized there were all these characteristics and habits that influencers have. And so I made the framework, the first step is launch. The second step is share. And the third step is thrive. And then each of the chapters supports that framework. And once I realized that my secret sauce, that's when everything changed, because it made it more digestible as a reader. When I give talks, I talk about the sequence. And then I realized, like, this is what you can apply to an online business or an entrepreneur. But I never would have had that realization if I didn't give it out to people for free. And then now I'm charging for it. And I found those people I give it out to, the first people to leave Amazon reviews, the first people to email me, they're excited about the book. And so psychologically, my wife didn't understand and I didn't understand. But giving it out to that community actually helped make everything better. And more importantly, I realized these people were invested in me and wanted to help me succeed once it launched.
Wow. So, yeah, that was very much on purpose.
Yeah, this guy Nir Eyal was like, look, give it out. And then they became crowd editors as well. So everyone got an acknowledgement in the book.
And I heard a podcast with Nir on it, and really, really fascinating stuff. I haven't been able to read the book yet, but smart guy. And
Nir wrote a book blurb.
Wow, very cool.
On the book, right? So one of the influencer economy steps is collab. So you need to collaborate. And the idea is that once you have a platform or an opportunity to collab with someone, then you build that relationship. And so Nir and I would have never connected, but I cold emailed him. And I'm a firm believer in cold outreach. He's got to find people there. Everyone's discoverable. And so I emailed him out of the blue and said, hey, my buddy recommended your book, said it's a great resource. I read it. It was great. I believe that you'd be a fantastic podcast guest. And it's kind of a funny story because Nir emailed me, yeah, I'd love to come on your podcast. And he lives in the Bay Area and I'm in Los Angeles. And I don't tell this story that much, but I was really shocked because then he emails me after a couple of emails. He said, hey, I'm going to land in LAX for the event. We probably could be more efficient if you picked me up from the airport. And I was with my family. It was over Thanksgiving. I said, wait, this guy is really successful. He has a lot of money. He can pay for an Uber or a cab. But I was like, what do I have to lose? And so we got in the car. I picked him up in my Prius, very Californian. And we stuck in traffic, again, very LA. And 2 hours later, we had an amazing conversation, and he gave me really good advice about the book. And then we did the podcast interview in my car. And it was really funny. We're like in the Prius outside this venue that he's about to speak at, because he came to have a speaking gig for one night. And he's spoken for 250 people. And here I am, like, I had an interview. I didn't pay for any of this. It's giving me free advice. We collabed in my car. It sounds weird. Believe me, it wasn't. And then everyone at the event, like, paid $15 and bought a book. And I was like, oh, wow, I got these insights because I had a platform and I reached out to him from a cold email. And then a year later, I sent him an advance copy. And, he wrote a blurb that's on the back of my book. And, the rest is history.
And because from doing a lot of email outreach myself, you always hear when you mention that to somebody, they're like, oh yeah, I meant to. A lot of people just say, yeah, I meant to do that, or I'm going to do that, but I'm just, I just don't know what to say and stuff. But I mean, all you said was, hey, I read you showed what you did, that you actually weren't just cold emailing out of nowhere, that you had actually read his stuff. What else did you say?
So I craft the headlines in a very easy to digest way. I always put three commas in. So I say hooked, comma, podcast, comma, influencer economy chat, question mark. So I like to leave it open-ended so people have a call to action. So you're not just pitching them, you're presenting. I'm against the pitch. I think you need to present. You present a case for someone to make it a win-win. So you present your idea. It's up to them to opt in. And opting out doesn't mean not returning your email. It means a definitive no. And so so I want to make it easy for them to say yes. So I said to Nir, my friend referred the book. I read it. It was great. And then these are the things I want to talk about. And I made it really easy.
Right.
And then I think the kicker was I had social proof. So I didn't reach out to Nir like as a first guest. I had some 35, 40 episodes. So I said, I've talked to Brad Feld, who's a tech investor. I've talked to other authors like Willie Geist from the Today Show, or YouTubers like Bernie Burns, and some people he never even heard of. But I made it so I had this credibility as well. And that's another way. Like a lot of people just think influencers. But you have to have that social proof and really build out your credibility before you just jump into it.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay. So, I'm just trying to think of for people that haven't done it, or present, don't pitch.
Yeah, always present. Yeah. Never come in, because presenting is a place of confidence, and pitching is a place of I need your help.
Desperation.
Right? Yeah, like I need a favor, and you never want to put someone in a position where it's a favor, because the second you say, hey, I want to have you help me, it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to help you and be gone.
Yeah.
And you want to make it a collaborative thing where it's a win-win, where, he's coming on my podcast, and at the time I didn't have a lot of listeners, but he didn't even ask. He just saw I had social proof. I was obviously like someone who's trying to reach out to him, so it was flattering. And then more importantly, he just likes to have good conversations and connect with people.
You were showing you actually did something. It reminds me of the difference, what you were talking about between a nerd and a nerdist.
Yeah.
Like nerds consume, but nerdists actually get involved and create.
Right.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, exactly. Being a nerd's a passive experience. And Chris Hartwick, who's a host of the Nerdist podcast and has built a media company off the brand of it, he says nerdists are actually creators. And when I launched companies like State.com, which is a mobile app, I learned that 90% of the people are nerds, like they're passive consumers, and then 9% are curators, so they kind of help and connect, and then 1% are really the influencers.
That was one of the points I highlighted. So that's in you said in the influencer economy, there's three types of people. So influencers, curators, and consumers. And while we're talking about, let's talk about that really quick. So you were talking about making sure you involve all three of those groups.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, you sort of have to decide where you fall in that continuum. And if you want to be a passive community member, I mean, we're all members of the communities. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great. I love being part of communities. But if you really want to take your next step in the influencer economy or launching anything to propel your business, you have to take the step to be a curator, because you need to be the exchange that you can help people be the better. Community members need your ideas and the content, but you may not be the expert. You may not be the influencer, but if you can bridge the gap with the influencers, like I'm getting, I had let's say Seth Godin on my podcast. I'm never going to be that influencer like Seth. I would love to be, but he's written 15 best-selling books. So no matter where I am in the world, this is not going to happen. But if I can deliver his message to my community, then I'm effectively a curator, but I'm equally an influencer to other people. So I think you have to take that step to say, I'm going to be a curator. What am I going to curate? And that could be a blog, a podcast. And it's often picking a platform. And it's using some sort of technology to your advantage, an email list, something that you can connect with people, public speaking, a coaching program that you want to build up to, that your platform is going to help get you there.
So picking your platform, something I'm also really passionate about, and just helping people do that. But your platform, you decided when you got into this, was podcasting. And
right.
how'd you decide on that?
Well, I always advise people when they're picking a platform to validate it in 3 ways.
Okay.
And if you don't have that 3 prong validation, then you can't do it. And so for me, it's like curiosity was one.
Okay.
I was curious. I wanted to write the book, and the book was the research for the book was the podcast. And so I knew I could get the foot in the door with the influencers, the profile in the book, to then learn and soak up information. That's the first validation. The second is I was a stand-up comedian back in the day. I love connecting with audiences. As a comedian, I bombed my fair share, so I didn't connect with an audience like I wanted to, but even bombing gives you feedback. So I love the feedback of a podcast and interacting with folks. And then the third was I worked at Machinima and for a big YouTube network. So I knew influencers that were YouTube creators. And those were my first 10 guests. So I could validate actually having really interesting collaborators come on the podcast. And so I always recommend picking a platform. If you only have 2 reasons, then don't do it. You have to have that third validation. For me, that was the guests.
Gotcha. Very cool. And how each one kind of bleeds into the next just helps you be a lot more efficient with your end goal.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you use the podcast to write the book and to further the relationships in the influencer economy, which is what it's all about.
Right. And you can really, the foot in the door is all you need. And I think a lot of people burn their business relationships because they look for a quick deal. And if you want to actually collaborate with influencers, it's a long game.
Yes.
And realize you may get rejected, ignored, or they may, I get big leagued all the time. I mean, I thought writing a book would be this great door opening, and it is, absolutely, but I still get people like, oh, I read your book, and they never respond unless I mean, it's just, it never ends, right?
Right.
But it's a long game. And I was like, you know what, move on to the next, right? Someone rejects you, then just, there's plenty of people out there in the universe.
And if it was about the game to you, you probably would have quit by now, but it's more about the relationships and the people.
We met how many years ago? And you actually wrote a book, or you wrote a blog post with 100 business podcasts or 50 business podcasts you should listen to. I didn't know I was on this list until I saw a Google Analytic dashboard spike from your post. And then I emailed you, I believe, and then here we are now 2 years later, right? Our paths have crossed again, and that's really what happens. And if you really, it's attrition. Like I used to work in film and entertainment, and that is actually, after I did stand-up comedy, I moved to LA with my wife, and I worked on shows like The Wire. I was a PA on that in Baltimore before I moved, because I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. And I come out here, and entertainment was not my forte. It was not where I wanted to be. But I found out it was about attrition. And the advice I got was, you want to be a PA on a set because someone's going to quit tomorrow and you're going to take their job. And there's a line. And the second someone moves to Hollywood and fails and goes home, you just bump the line one more. And that's a long game. And I still practice that, even though I don't work in entertainment. And that, when you get rejected, or you find someone, that isn't interested in collaborating or working with you, then you say, okay, I'm going to file this. In 6 months, a year, maybe longer, I'm going to work with this person, and I'm going to earn it.
May not be the right time right now, but that's okay.
Yeah, like for example, Seth Godin, notorious for not doing podcasts. I ended up emailing him cold outreach, and he told me he was busy. This is about a year and a half ago. I then emailed him a year later and asked if he was still busy, and I had these other guests that he knew, like Derek Sivers and folks that he was, Brad Feld, like I mentioned before. And so I had that social proof. And he's probably thinking, oh, this guy's actually doing this. I'm not going to blow him off again. So he then comes on my podcast finally a year and a half later, play the long game. I say, hey, Seth, we get thanks for coming on. I wrote a book, The Influencer Economy. I quote you. Can I send it to you? And he says, happy to take a look. I get his address. I send him the book. It's an advanced copy. And I email him and he says, I'm too busy. Sorry. Good luck with the project. So he's still rejecting me, even though I'm like so fired up that I even got him on my podcast.
Heck yeah.
And I have to think, okay, I'll file this in my role, whatever the modern day version of a file cabinet is. I'll put it in my Dropbox folder, metaphorically, and who knows?
Yeah.
I got further with Seth than who I really look up to than a lot of other people that didn't even attempt to reach out to him.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, and heck, you had him on your podcast. I mean, that's awesome. How do you keep up with your relationships?
I think you have to accept that you're not going to be everyone's best friend, and that merely because you collaborate with someone on a project and it's not going to move the needle necessarily in your long-term relationship. But keep in the back of your mind, you can always reach that person out again, because you can't, they're going to remember you. And so, I know one tactic that I sometimes use is I help people make introductions for them. I say, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while, but I met this person for coffee who'd be perfect. And I feel like you can't just rely on that, but that's also an easy way to help people. And I support people. I buy their book. I mentioned Adam Grant's book on so many podcasts, and Nir Eyal, I just talked about him. And I feel like if you just sort of keep going, even if you don't notify these people that you've actually helped them sell copies or move them along, you just do it to do it, and ultimately the universe comes back. I don't want to get too spiritual, but
no, it's giving is I believe hugely in that. The people that say, why haven't I gotten more, or that are always complaining about not having enough or not getting further or whatever, if you turn that around and look and say, how much have I actually given, how what have I done for other people, it's usually a direct reflection of it.
Like, who have you helped today?
Me?
Right? Like, that's the question you have to ask yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Every day.
Like, can you connect someone? Right? And I make people earn it. I just don't help to help. And you have to, like Adam Grant talks about how you have to have your giving self-aligned with your own interests. So you don't fail as a giver.
Yeah.
But ultimately you're out here right now and you can't do it by yourself. And the whole mythology of, I'm going to build a company out of my garage, like the founders of Instagram did when they graduated Stanford. That's such a misnomer. And you have to really put yourself out there and think, like, can I help someone? Because even though that person's not going to directly help me, in the end someone else will help you along the way.
Exactly. What's one thing that really surprised you or caught you off guard in your research for the book?
One was that I'm a marketer, and the book is about marketing, but I don't ever mention the word marketing. And I found that community building is the new marketing in a way. I'm not going to come here and say something like marketing is dead, but what I realized was marketing's dead. No, what I realized was that community building is really what everyone I talked to was so good at. And some people accidentally were great community builders. Like they're early adopters of YouTube, like the Vlogbrothers that built the channel in 2006 when there was less competition. They got featured on the front page of YouTube for this Harry Potter video they did, and that really helped them catalyze a community. But in this era, you need to build a community in any business. And it could be a friend group, it could be your personal network, it could be an influencer group. But ultimately, I was surprised that the community building was the one aspect everyone was able to harness to launch their business.
And what do you think that says about, let's talk about that for a second. To me, I hear that, or just my initial reaction is, you really can't you can't even buy the real attention of people anymore, or long-term attention. You simply cannot buy it. You have to earn it over time if you want to keep it.
Right.
And the only way to do that is in a tribe, in a community. Is that kind of
absolutely.
what the core?
Yeah, totally. It's like, for me, I talk about you building your community launch team. And it's like any idea you have, you need to like email your friends and say, hey, like I'm putting my podcast out tomorrow. Can you leave a review on iTunes? You know, like make direct calls to action. And even if you have a friend group, like I talk about hustle points a lot. I don't mention it in the book, but recently I figured out everyone needs hustle points to get that social proof. So if you launch an app into the iTunes store, you need reviews. Same with a podcast. You launch a book, you need Amazon reviews. And these are like vanity metrics that mean a lot to other people to think that you're credible. And so even if your community of 20 friends from college leave you iTunes reviews, that matters. And so you can't undervalue anyone you know as a member of your community. I think a lot of people make mistakes because they think that their community has to be like a tribe of believers in whatever they're building. It's like, no, your friends, your former colleagues, all these people are going to alpha test your product before it goes into beta. Like that's who your community starts with.
And a lot of people do discount their communities when they are mostly maybe consumers and curators. Even if you don't have you don't need to be an influencer to leave an Amazon review or promote a blog post.
Yeah, absolutely. You can leave a review if you're anyone, and that's so valuable to an author. And the community building, like you should never launch an idea unless you have a community and have them lined up. Like I'm launching a course right now based on the book.
Oh, really?
And the reason why is because a community member of mine in San Francisco on my book tour suggested it. I did more research on it, and I was like, you know what? These courses are so expensive. And I've done one, and it didn't provide me that much value. And I think this was written like a course, the book itself. But that's what someone suggested. It's like Biz Stone and Ev, that's the founders of Twitter. They didn't have hashtags when they launched, and community members suggested, hey, you should trend topics with hashtags. Like, terrible idea. But the tech community had been doing that for years in their online forums, and now hashtags are on Instagram and Facebook, and they make you money. So listening to your community can really help you make money because they are your testers, and they could just be your friends from high school.
Yeah. That was the main way that I built my courses, was started with one, and then every single person that came in, I personally messaged them and asked them, hey, what's the biggest thing you're struggling with in this topic? And I've had hundreds of answers that I would respond back to, and then I would record it, in a spreadsheet, and then I just went through and found the biggest things and, made another course off of that, and then did it again and off of that. These people weren't influencers or anything. They were valued community members.
Absolutely. And that aspect of the community is something brands will pay for. And that's why being an influencer in your industry, it could be the most specific niche industry, is valuable to companies because they need to buy their credibility, and no one clicks on banner ads.
Yeah.
Exactly. I hate banner ads.
Everybody has pop-up blockers, and I feel like those have, for us, those have been dead for a year or two, even.
Yeah.
There's so many good stories. So many really interesting ones, and it fascinates me that you were at the very beginning of the whole, the very first. What was it? The conference for YouTube.
Oh, VidCon.
VidCon, right?
Yeah.
These guys who were then pretty much no-namers, like their communities were tiny, and now are just making as much money as these Hollywood celebrities, and they're playing video games or doing skits in their house.
I love it.
That's just it's incredible. A lot of people don't understand how YouTubers make their money. Let's talk about that for a second, and just what are the different ways that?
Yeah. So YouTubers. So the conference you're talking about is VidCon, and it's just. I went to the very first one. It was at a Hyatt Regency in Los Angeles. Less than 1,000 people, and these YouTubers were like had fans across the country, like flying in town to like take selfies and do videos and collaborate. And now it's like a 25,000 person conference in Anaheim, and it's an industry event for online video. So brands and startups work with influencers, and the cool thing about it, it's like Comic-Con where the community is there. So fans come. And the guys that started it were these vlog brothers that made these funny vlogs with about their lives, and a vlog is a video blog for people that don't know. And with people like them that are massive influencers now, they run ads. So they do like pop-up ads on YouTube, and actually YouTube ads do convert. That's the one.
Yes, they do.
They're much different than a lot of ads on websites. So you make CPM dollars, and YouTube sells ads on behalf of YouTubers, and you do a rev share, so you get 45% of the ads, and they get 55%. Like YouTube's the only social network that pays you money to use it, and that's why I love it, because Twitter doesn't pay you to tweet, Facebook really doesn't pay you to post. Actually, Facebook makes you pay to get your post seen because it's so noisy. So ad revenue is a big one. Product placement's an emerging one. And the FTC laws are kind of murky on disclosure.
Yes.
So it's fast and loose in a lot of ways.
I know, wasn't it PewDiePie that got busted not too long ago for that?
Yeah, people get busted all the time, and it's just a hard thing to enforce.
Yeah.
So usually it happens when someone leaks like emails from Sony or whatever, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we paid $20,000 for these guys to make videos on Minecraft and with product placements." So yeah, product placements are big, and now most of these YouTubers are going multi-platform, like off YouTube into like exclusive Netflix releases or exclusive online video releases, and then an emerging trend. I used to want to start a management company for podcasters, and it didn't work out because I found podcasters to be like hard to work with. They were just like stand-up comedians and just had their edge and personality quirks. But all these YouTubers now go off-platform. So they're doing books, they're doing traditional media, and they do massive book tours. They get really big advances. I read about Hannah Hart, who has a YouTube series called My Drunk Kitchen. She gets drunk and makes food, and she wrote a best-selling book, My Drunk Kitchen. It's a bunch of recipes how to make food drunk. They're doing movies. It's like they've had TV shows. It's funny though, because TV shows don't really work with YouTubers because it's just not their format. But now it's like they're getting dollars. They have agents. It's a whole industry. And so I thought podcasters would be that way, and they will be that way. But it's just too much to manage.
Yeah.
People.
Yes. Geez. Well, now that, like with TV, the format has changed a lot with like Apple TV, and you can get apps and you can see all these small, little clips. You can see YouTube on there. You can see, what's the one? There was some food one that, it's like 5 or 7 minute clips and stuff.
It's really easy to digest.
Changing. What?
It's just it's so easy to watch YouTube videos, and you can watch them sequentially. That's why ad dollars work well for these videos, because if you get a CPM, which means a cost per 1,000 views. So if you get like $30 for every 1,000 views, and if you're getting millions and millions and millions of views, that's a lot of income just for making stuff.
And like, it's still so easy for people to kind of shrug that off. But what kind of money are these guys making?
Interesting, right, is. So I ended up picking the influencers in the book. They're YouTubers, podcasters, self-published authors, and entrepreneurs, not people in the business world like we know. I found the business people like we know are like super boring. They're all like, "Hey, I need a course," or "I need a whatever." You know what I'm talking about. Like it just wasn't compelling. And I mean, I just realized like it's a 1%er game. Like it's really like 1% of YouTubers make 6 figures. And it's really hard now. It's different when I was at Machinima. It's so competitive. And it's the same with podcasters. 1% of the podcasters like Mark Maron and Nerdist make that money.
Yep. Same with Twitch.
Twitch, exactly, right? And so if you're a YouTuber, you could make 20,000 a year, which is pretty awesome. And now a lot of YouTubers move to LA because they want to get discovered and get agents. So the game's kind of changed. But yeah, I mean, I think on average, if you're a YouTube creator, you know, and you make 30K a year, that's amazing, right? But you still have a day job. And that's like what a lot of these people have to figure out, other income streams, because it's a long game. And was interesting, what I realized about YouTubers, and it's counterintuitive, was none of them have a viral moment. Like none of them have a video that pops and suddenly they're famous. It was all like, I just did this for 4 years, and one day I got massively popular, right?
Overnight success, right?
Yeah. And so there's a misnomer now, like I need a viral video, or I need to like get an influencer to tweet about my product, or I need a celebrity to endorse what I'm doing. And that's not going to work. You get a big spike, but it's not sustained. And most of these people built their communities years in the making.
Huh. Interesting.
And that's why I talk to people that are not YouTubers and they're business entrepreneurs. It's like we're always relaunch and always keep going with your idea. And we talked about this before. Like we're all in a constant state of relaunch, where we can't rely on just like one thing to pop. And you can tweak it and remake it because it's the internet. And YouTubers, one video doesn't do well, they just make another one, right? There's infinite supply that you can create and keep going and making new products and
Constant
ideas.
creation.
Yeah.
It's why when you hear people say, well, I could have done that, you know, it's like, yeah, you probably could have done that one video, but what about the 400 that came before it?
Yeah.
That's what people don't think about.
And that's why I started my podcast. And I didn't have any listeners at first because I want an archive. I want people to binge now that I've, you know, gained a little bit more of a following, so they can go back and listen to hopefully 20 and get value. And I try to make them more evergreen, so they're not, you know, structured about what's going on now. But yeah, it's like any sort of on-demand content, it's a long slog.
Yeah.
Like Nerdist has like 800 episodes.
Unbelievable. Let's talk about what I thought was the most like the coolest, and I think it was a term you branded, community building efficiency.
Yes.
Which, because it's so close to what I do, but I had never thought about it like that. Explain what it is.
Yeah, so I realized that in this day and age, you kind of have to figure out, like, is what you're doing relevant to the community that you're a part of? And it doesn't matter if you have an idea that's big. Great ideas don't get seen because you don't have a community and there's no customers, right? Like I talked to this guy on my podcast, Scott Belsky, wrote a really good book, Making Ideas Happen. And he talks about how you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
he's
I
great.
have it on my shelf.
He talks about how it's not an idea meritocracy. Just because you work hard doesn't mean your idea is going to work. And you have to really set yourself up to succeed. So being efficient is like, where is my community? Where does my product live in that world? You know, is there an efficiency in my community to help me grow my business or launch a product? And if not, then pivot or rethink what you're doing, because ultimately you're going to have a great idea that may never get seen, or give the idea to someone else, you know, or partner with a big, you know, I think a lot of people, they think if they get some celebrity to endorse their product, it's going to change them overnight. And I did research that celebrities don't move the needle. Lady Gaga, Ashton Kutcher, they get less than 0.5% click on their tweets. So I studied all these bit.ly links that track Twitter data, and I was like, that's worse than a banner ad. Like, that's ridiculous. So don't ask for celebrities to tweet. That's the dumbest. And it's a quick way to burn a relationship because people think you're using them for whatever cachet they have.
Very true. And I loved what you said about the ability to be more efficient than others you're competing with, which is the whole reason why I started the content creation, is to help people be more efficient. If you aren't good at writing, but you're a great communicator in person, you can have a one-up on people who, you know, just do the writing, you know, because you're able to create so much faster and so much easier.
Yes.
And I'm sure that's probably plays into why you did a podcast, because you not only enjoy it, but it's there's a lot that goes into it, but the idea exchange and the content creates itself.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Exactly.
And then there's always a moment where like you have to consider yourself as the underdog and really find your outsider perspective, because everyone else is doing it and succeeding, and if you compare yourself to them, you're going to fail, because you're going to ultimately psychologically say, oh, well, that guy or that gal is already really successful. Like Nerdist has 800 episodes and you're like, no, I'll never be that person. So it's like, what is your outside perspective that you could bring? Because everyone loves an underdog. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have to say, okay, I am not polished. I am not perfect. I'm not going to be number one podcast on iTunes or be a best-selling Amazon author right away. And so I think if you let people into the journey as well, by kind of like putting your guard down, that people do appreciate that kind of accessibility. And I realize influencers really are accessible, and they are not polished, and they're not like on the red carpet with tuxedos and beer weighing gowns, that they have flaws, and people want to see your warts and all. And that's really what endears people to your personality and ultimately you in the long run.
And the example you used was Bill Simmons, which I confessed before, I mean, I had seen a show on HBO, but didn't know who the heck he was. And then reading about his backstory was mind-blowing. And we won't go into it all, but just got to read the book for that. What chapter was that in?
That is chapter 6.
Awesome.
The chapter on collaboration.
Yes. But you were talking about his community building efficiency was when he was kind of going against the networks. He was writing a blog, and it was a lot easier he could write it and hit publish and done, versus a network where these guys had to pitch stories, submit them, go through the editing, approval process, another approval process, and couldn't do it nearly as efficiently, right?
And that's where I think, we have similar philosophies. Like, you've launched a lot of successful courses, and one of the reasons is because you're more efficient. Like, if I go to a college or even a community college or a vocational school, it's a process. You're taking a long course. You're showing up at night. You may have a family, where you can take a course that you've made on your own terms, on your own schedule. It's probably more reasonably priced, with more value and more coaching than you would get at a school, right? And so that's an efficiency that people now. Education is like that, and podcasting, it's all about like where you are in your world with your idea, and people say outworking or out hustling. The hustle word I never use in the book.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like everyone wants to hustle and they don't even know what they're doing. No. So it's more like being just efficient and just cutting out all the crap that gets in the way of you succeeding and going directly to the people that really want what you're making.
Exactly. I took forever to create my first course, and it killed me because I knew I should have done it years earlier, to the point where one of the last ones I did, or the second to the last one, I said, all right, I'm going to get this one out in a month, and did it in a month. Or I guess it was like a month and 3 days. But, where else can you do that, launch it to millions of people, and sell something that's awesome?
Yeah, you can really reach people. And I was the same way with my podcast. I wish I started it 3 years ago when I had the idea. But I had a day job, that I was broke. Like life gets in the way. And so I think I always tell people, like, just do it now. Even if it's terrible and no one, it doesn't matter. Like, do a crappy podcast for 6 episodes, then make a new one. Right? Like, it's so, like, everything is so disposable. And Brad Feld, who I keep mentioning, and he started this accelerator, Techstars, for, tech companies to get seed funding. And he's a brilliant guy at Boulder. And he gave me the advice that you should create as much as you can when the barrier to entry is low. And that oftentimes don't need to have a defined goal when starting out on a project. And so what's it to you if you start a blog and only post 5 times because it doesn't work for you. Maybe you'll meet a friend out of it. Maybe, you can learn technology, how to use WordPress that becomes a service you sell to other people. And that having that defined outcome gets in the way when other cooler, more realistic opportunities may come to be just because you started doing something that was easy to do.
So when he says when the barrier to entry is low, it means like when there's like a new, like kind of an emerging market or platform?
Or an older platform. I mean, if it's emerging, it helps you. Like if you were podcasting 5 years ago and still are doing it, you are in a great place.
Yes.
Right? Early adoption is a big part of the influencer economy. However, you can still start a podcast, and that just could be a process building thing.
Exactly.
You could start a course and have one sign up, but that gives you, hey, I already did a course. It helps your story to tell people. You could get one testimonial for the course that you could use for the next big thing you want to do. And so, as long as it's not too time consuming, I think a lot of people obsess over perfection. And just realizing that you're raw, and that's what makes you unique.
So it makes YouTube.
Yeah, it makes everything we do, as long as it's quality and you really put the effort into it, then do it from your living room and test it out and try it. And if it doesn't work, then move on.
So last question, and just kind of on the spot. You learned a bunch of stuff as you were going through this. We talked about those insights that you didn't really, that you were kind of surprised from. But what have you actually learned? Like, what's one thing that you have actually learned from? How many interviews have you done?
Now 90.
90 from the 90 interviews, which is it's incredible. I just think of like you couldn't calculate the amount that it would be a lot if you calculated the amount of each person's time that's worth and the education and the knowledge that you've got that's available to anyone. It's awesome. But what's one thing that you've learned and actually implemented that's made a big difference that has to do with the influencer economy?
Yeah, the one real counterintuitive thing, we talked about community building and a lot of these points already, is that like you have to master something as much as you can. And the true influencers, they master YouTube or they master podcasting or they master writing a book. Then they pivot and go to something bigger. And pivoting doesn't mean you rip up everything you've done. It just means you segue into something. And that's how I interviewed this guy, Troy Carter, who used to he's a talent manager. He used to manage Lady Gaga.
Okay.
Probably made like $20 million off of this. And now he is an investor in technology companies. So he invested in Uber and Lyft and Dropbox and all these and he's only writing checks for like 25 to 50K, but he's making so much wealth from this and he still is doing the management. And so for me, it's like I had the big vision with the book, and the podcast was the day-to-day to keep me going. And like we've talked about what it did for me. And then now that I have the book, I didn't stop. I booked my own speaking tour and I partnered with this group, General Assembly, and they do teaching. They have like a lab and campus for people to learn technical skills. So I did San Francisco and LA, New York, DC, and Raleigh, Durham. So I booked my own tour, right? And then now I'm doing the course. So I feel like you need to get to a certain level of mastery, and I'm no means am I like a podcast guru master. I don't like the word guru either, but
terrible.
I just realized, let's edit that out. No kidding. But I realized that like the true influencers, they do that one thing that they master it to the level they need to, and then they move on to the next platform, and they almost use everything like an MVP. So the minimum viable product, which is in the lean manufacturing and with the lean startup, is they treat everything lean. They master it. It leads to the next, to the next, to the next. And your vision's always going to change. But the more you master and move on and master and move on, like the course is now my big focus. And I have no idea what's next. But I wouldn't have gotten there without the steps of the podcast and the book and booking my own tour.
Yes. It's awesome. Love it. Where can people find you?
If they go to influencereconomy.com, that's the website. You can find links to my podcast and the book as well.
And I'll put all of those below.
Yeah. I'm actually renaming my podcast to the Rhino Lab.
You are?
Yeah, and I ended up renaming it because I learned about branding, and most of the top influencers I interviewed, their companies or branding was 4 syllables or less, and they used hard consonants like WTF, Nerdist, Rocket Jump. So now Rhino Lab, Rhino is a derivative of my name. I have a rhinoceros with my glasses. It's like a t-shirt logo versus the influencer economy or stories from the influencer economy works for a book. I guess that's another example of baking in something that I learned.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And also just the insight of the syllables. So I need to, well, I've got Flux, but
Flux is cool.
I think I need to. I finally bought the domain with the just FLUX. Drop the E because it's so confusing. But anyways,
You have Flux.com?
What?
You have Flux.com?
No, don't have Flux.com.
Okay.
No, I don't think that's going to be available for a while. Just
someone's owned that for like 15 years. And
yeah, I have Flux.co.
Okay.
Anyways, Ryan, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time, jumping on here, chatting about these things. I would highly, highly recommend getting a highlighter and getting a book, or just getting it on Kindle, or getting The Influencer Economy. So many good stories, and just checking out your podcast. Unbelievable people. There's so much to learn, and they're just entertaining. Really good stuff. So thank you so much, man.
Psyched to be here. Thanks for having me.